Hello. Oh, this plant is a lot more in the way than what I thought. Not that way. Okay, cool. Do. All right. So, welcome. I'll just give a little bit more time for a few people to join in. So, we'll get started very shortly. Hopefully, you can all hear me okay. For anyone who's been playing along, I've been in Melbourne and I'm now back in Newcastle. I met my new nephew, so that was very exciting. He's adorable. Hi, everyone. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Georgie. Thanks for joining. We have got a few here now, so we might get started. This plant's going to bother me, but anyway, that's okay. It just adds to the vibe. Okay, so welcome everyone. For anyone who doesn't yet know me, my name's Chelsea. I am the nutritionist and naturopath here at Slim by Nature. And I take a few of these lives, usually maybe every second week. And hey, Jess, thanks for joining. And yeah, so today's topic is all about allergies and intolerances. So as we're going, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them here. I will try to answer them as I go. Sometimes I don't see them straight away, but I will do my best. Otherwise, I'll answer them at some stage throughout the talk. And then I also usually come in the next day and just answer them all on actual Facebook comments. This tree is really bugging me. Hang on, you can see if I can. Okay. Hopefully that does the trick. Okay. So before we jump into the topic, I just wanted to remind everyone who's on the challenge that today is your first day of maintenance. So basically, if anyone, this is the first time you've done our program, then it will obviously be the first time that you have done maintenance. So you will have stopped taking your phase 2 drops 2 days ago. And then you take your maintenance drops throughout maintenance. So that'll be 7 drops, 20 minutes before meals, 3 times a day. So it's the exact same dose as what you were doing with your phase 2 drops, but just a slightly different formulation. So this formulation is a little bit more targeted to helping boost metabolism, increase it. There's probably a couple more things in there that help to support appetite and increasing detoxification channels, purely because the way that the meals are structured is really helping to make sure that we're increasing that metabolism, but we're not focusing so much on detox anymore. The whole point of maintenance is really to lock in those results. So a lot of people, when they finish, the standard, I guess, diet and they come off it, they tend to experience weight gain. Not everyone does, obviously. It depends exactly how you come out of that phase of weight loss, which is why we've developed this maintenance phase. So it's really, really important for making sure that you don't regain any of that weight that you've worked so hard to lose. And also, obviously don't want people to come off detox or a period of weight loss and to experience, a lot more hunger or to feel really, really tempted by bad foods, I guess. We also really want to try to lock in those healthy habits and food choices. So maintenance does that. So for the first week of maintenance, no new foods are added, but your portions will be slowly increased. So for the first day, actually, it's the exact same food as what you've been eating during phase 2, but obviously with the maintenance drops, and then it will begin to change. Week 2, we begin to introduce a few healthy fats. So you'll notice olive oil, avocado, butter, nuts, and seeds all come into your diet. A new healthy fat's basically added every 2 days. And then your protein and vegetable portions actually remain the same throughout this week 2 period. So they've slowly increased during week 1, and then they'll stay the same through week 2 because we're kind of increasing that energy intake through the healthy fats. And then week 3, you're able to introduce some new proteins if you'd like to. Not everyone necessarily eats different proteins, but that will be lamb and pork. Those are really the only other ones that aren't on the program anymore. And then you can start combining 2 vegetables in the same meal, and then all portions of vegetables, protein, and healthy fats will all gradually increase throughout week 3 as well. Okay, so you will have 3 weeks of maintenance. Today's day 1, so I think it should get a little bit easier. A lot of people do tend to lose a little bit of weight still throughout maintenance, but obviously that's not the big goal anymore. So if you're not, don't stress. It's just great that we can go through this space to lock in those healthy habits and to kind of avoid that rebound afterwards. Okay, so I just want to quickly touch on what is going on for next week's live. So next week on the 16th of November, Zana will be interviewing Therese Mitchell about her new book. It's called Stories of the Streets. So this book is all about stories from people who have come through Therese's homeless shelter. It sounds very interesting. So everyone join in next week to listen to Zana and Therese. And then the week after, so we haven't actually started speaking about this yet because we obviously had today's live to be talking about instead. But the week after, so 2 weeks from today, on the 23rd of November, we're actually doing something quite exciting. So we are going to be running, or I'm going to be running, a live holistic counseling, what's the right word? Workshop, a holistic counseling workshop. So this is something that I actually many times have run as a one-on-one session with people, and people love it. And I love taking them because it really is a nice space to kind of dive a little bit deeper into your own health, your own goals, and exactly what you need to do to get between where you are and where you want to go. And it's kind of the space that people don't always allow themselves. It's very, very interesting. We go through all the dimensions of health. So it's not just weight loss goals. I think that's where this is really, really important for a lot of people who do our Slim by Nature detoxes, or who are maybe going through any of their own kind of weight loss or health journeys, is that this really gives you a chance to identify all of the other aspects of health. So, for example, things like your social health, your financial health, intellectual health, environmental health even. So we kind of discuss what all of those are. And then we will go through this worksheet. And obviously it's not one-on-one. You won't be able to tell me what you're writing down, but you will have the time during the session to kind of take that space, and I'll talk you through the whole process. So it's different to sometimes when we do these lives, or when, especially some of the lives that I do, and Zana's done it before as well, we'll create worksheets for you guys to do at home or to use as references later on. This session is definitely something that we need to do together. Even though you won't be able to tell me what you're writing down on your sheet, but for me to be able to step you through exactly what your examples of what each section means. So it's going to be a really, really awesome session. This is something that, if you wanted to do as a one-on-one, you would have to kind of pay for an hour to see a counselor or a naturopath or a life coach or some other sort of therapist or holistic health specialist. So it'll be really great to be able to all do it together for free in the comfort of your own home. So I look forward to having as many people as possible join for that one. We will also be sending out the worksheet in advance so that you'll all have it there ready to go through together on the night. Okay, so let's get started on allergies and intolerances. This is a very, very interesting topic. I think one for us in this detox, because our detoxes are kind of planned in a way that it allows you to identify if your body isn't responding to something. And that technically is an intolerance. because we structure it so that you will only eat one vegetable per meal and you'll only eat one protein per meal, it kind of gives you that space and opportunity to be able to see what isn't working for you. And that is one kind of main method of identifying intolerances. So that's a really big reason why we've done that, because another really big factor in creating long-term change is knowing what doesn't suit you in terms of taste, in terms of your lifestyle, but also in terms of how your body responds to things. So it's something that we really prioritize, and I think a lot of people get a lot of benefit out of it. It's what helps make allows people to create a long-term change. And we'll get a little bit deeper later into how to actually identify your intolerances if you still are not 100% sure. And actually, as a bonus, we have a worksheet that we will be sending out via emails tomorrow, and maybe I'll post it in the Facebook group as well. Okay, so basically an allergy is an excessive or unnecessary immune response to a certain substance. So the key kind of point there is that it is an immune response. So when we're exposed to the allergen, the body starts to make a protein called IgE. So you'll often or potentially you've heard someone say an IgE-based allergen or whatever they may say, which then basically grabs onto the allergen, releases histamine and other chemicals into the blood, which then cause whatever particular symptoms someone may experience from that allergy. So allergies are extremely common, and they're actually on the rise as well. So the World Health Organization warned that the prevalence of allergic disease worldwide is rising dramatically in both developed and developing countries. So this isn't something that we're immune to because we live in a more developed country, or I think on the contrary, actually we do see rates increasing slightly differently in developed and undeveloped countries, but it is increasing worldwide. And there are a lot of factors that play into that, which we will also get into. So hay fever, which people may experience, particularly at this time of year, I know I get it myself. And it is also something that we can help, not necessarily cure, because if your body responds allergically to something, it's very debatable about whether or not you can cure it. But anyway, we'll also get into that. So about 400 million people worldwide experience hay fever. Asthma affects about 300 million. Food allergies between 200 and 250 million. And drug allergies affect around 10% of the world's population. So like I was saying before, that the rate of allergies worldwide has actually increased quite significantly, so more than doubled since 1960. So in 1960, about 3% of the population worldwide had allergies. And in 2018, the last time they released one of these studies, it was around 7%. So as I said, that's more than doubled, which is really, really significant. And it's not just the rate that's increased, it's also the range of foods that people are now allergic to, or allergens in general. There's no single explanation to why the world's becoming more allergic to food. It is something that a lot of people are researching, and a lot of people are interested, because obviously intolerances are one thing, and we'll talk about a lot of their symptoms, but allergies can definitely be deadly, and they really affect the way that people live. If you have a food allergy, it can be quite isolating, because you're concerned about maybe certain people's homes that you can eat at, certain restaurants that you can and can't go to. You may feel like you miss out on those social experiences. So it is a really big issue worldwide. There are a lot of theories, I guess, and not just theories, I would say a lot of statistics that we know that do link into why allergies are on the rise. So one is improved hygiene. So they say that if we're kind of over cleansing, I guess, or over sanitizing, that we don't have that exposure to a lot of the bacteria that we need to form a healthy immune system. And we actually have a few different kind of known stats or bits of information to back this up. So we actually do know that children who grew up with pets and were exposed to pet hair, and I guess any anything else that the pet carries around with them have much more robust immune systems. Parasitic infections are another reason that people think that our allergy rates may have increased. Increased exposure to pesticides. This is a really big one. I think this is probably another major theory. It's not just the pesticides that people spray onto our crops. It's then also what we ingest as well. So pesticides still, once they've been spread into the soil, they still go into the plant. Then they also reduce the amount of vitamins and minerals that plant can absorb from the soil. And then it also reduces the amount of vitamins and minerals that we can then absorb from the plant. So it's really just a vicious cycle. And lower vitamin D is another really big one. So vitamin D is actually a vitamin that's really essential for our immune system. It's actually needed to regulate our T cells, so they're really important immune cells. So yes, that is another major potential theory as to why. Hi Bronwyn, welcome. Hi, I can't see, Facebook user. Sorry, I don't know why it doesn't say your name, but thanks for joining. Okay, so that's a little bit about allergies. Intolerances, on the other hand, there is no immune response. IgE cells are not brought into play. And intolerance has a lot more to do with our digestive capabilities, I guess. So a food intolerance particularly is difficulty digesting certain foods and then having an unpleasant physical reaction to them. So you can't ever actually die from a food intolerance. That's something that an allergy can definitely cause. A food intolerance is more, and these actually can be very, very unpleasant is probably not the right word. They can range from just unpleasant to really quite debilitating symptoms as a result of an intolerance. But the key thing to remember is that allergy is related to immune and intolerance is related to digestion. Okay, so symptoms. Allergy symptoms can range really widely, and they depend on the method of exposure. Vitamin D is essential for our brains. Yeah, absolutely. So that's another thing. Vitamin D is essential for so many different things. Immune function is just one, and then that plays into our allergy and intolerance or allergy response. But definitely our bones. Also things like autoimmune conditions. They think that has a lot to do with our vitamin D levels. So I think things like Hashimoto's. So thyroid autoimmune conditions, things like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, these are all also being linked to low vitamin D levels, absolutely our bones as well. And then the really important role that vitamin D has in regulating a lot of our other minerals. So there's a lot. There's a lot to cover, but it is very, very essential. And sun exposure is definitely our best way to get healthy levels of vitamin D. I would love to cover that in a lot more detail, actually, the benefits of sun exposure and how to actually get healthy sun exposure, because I definitely can appreciate the risks of getting too much sun, but I think that there's almost a high risk of not getting enough healthy levels of sun. Hey, Andrea, thanks for joining. So yeah, vitamin D is just one factor. And then, yeah, vitamin D plays into a whole host of other things. So allergy symptoms depends on our exposure method. So for example, if you were to inhale the allergy, so say for example, it was dust or animal hair or something like that, it might tend to result in itchy eyes or nose, watery eyes or nose, sneezing. If it's a skin allergen, rashes, hives, swollen, itchy, red skin are all really, really common. If it's a food allergy, stomach cramps, vomiting, and diarrhea. I would actually, before I finish this list, these are definitely all milder. Insect stings, swelling, redness, and pain. So symptoms, as I said, can range from these more mild ones to severe. And most will go away shortly after the exposure, but definitely the severe allergy symptoms are not something that we want to be messing around with. So a lot of you will know what anaphylaxis is, or will have potentially grown up with someone with anaphylaxis, will know how to use an EpiPen or have been trained in that kind of thing. That's exactly what it's for. So if someone has a really severe reaction to an allergen, that's the worst result, I would say. Intolerant symptoms. So it does depend on the intolerance, and everyone's intolerant symptoms are quite different. So some common examples would be bloating, stomach pain. This usually happens a few hours after eating the food. It can also be things like constipation, diarrhea, kind of dark circles under your eyes, fatigue and irritability. So what often happens, like I said, because intolerances are more linked to the digestive system, if our digestive tract is unhealthy, basically, or suboptimal, or the cells are damaged, then that can also mean if we're not digesting properly, we're not absorbing properly. And if we're not absorbing our vitamins and minerals, some more than others, but they are essential for a host of different things within our body. So that's why when I said before that intolerant symptoms can be unpleasant, they actually really can be quite debilitating, because it can lead to a host of other things like, extreme fatigue, because we're not absorbing those vitamins and minerals that we need to produce energy, disturbed moods, challenges with sleep because we don't have enough to produce melatonin. So it really depends on the person, but they can play out in a very large range of ways. What problems would this typically... mold exposure. Throat ozero, YSide, SPN. Oh, hi, Natasha. Sorry, I don't know why it doesn't say your name. Mold exposure is a really interesting one. I know a little bit about it, but it's quite complex from what I understand. And I think it's very, very debilitating from what I hear. Fatigue is a really big one. I think potentially respiratory challenges, a lot of brain fog, mood changes. I think it really depends on the person and the level of mold exposure, but I think that's actually another reason that that's so difficult, is because it often goes undiagnosed or completely misdiagnosed depending on exactly where you've gone to get a diagnosis. So I think a lot of doctors... Hey, Kim. I think a lot of doctors probably aren't trained on it. And actually, in saying that, as a naturopath, we never really did much training on mold exposure. I think it's probably something that you would maybe specialize in, or that you would learn if you would have a few mold exposure clients. I actually don't know how to test for mold exposure or mold. I guess everyone would respond slightly differently to mold, but I think anyone who is exposed to it would probably technically be like intolerant to it, because they would have some sort of a response to it. Okay, so some common allergies and intolerances. So in terms of allergies, we've got grass and tree pollens, dust mites, animal dander, food. So the main food ones, a lot of us would probably know, are nuts, particularly peanuts, fruit, shellfish, eggs, cow milk, insect bites and stings, and then certain medicines. So some people can actually be allergic to ibuprofen, aspirin, and certain antibiotics. Intolerances, so dairy, which can be either lactose or casein. So lactose is, I guess, one of the sugars of dairy. Casein is a protein. It's actually the protein in milk that makes it addictive. So the reason that it's addictive is because the mother cow wants the baby cow to keep coming back and drinking her milk so that the cow will grow big and strong. And it is actually quite an addictive element, but a lot of people do have an intolerance to casein. Gluten, so this is wheat, barley, and rye. This is another very, very common intolerance. I personally do believe that everyone has some level of intolerance to gluten. We'll get a little bit more into what happens in the gut lining when you experience an intolerance, but basically gluten is a protein that is really, really large, really, really inflammatory, and our bodies just generally don't respond well to it. So depending on the level of intolerance, everyone's gut cells will kind of pull apart to some degree. So basically our gut has a lining that should be really, really intact. They're called tight junctions, so the cells should be quite tight. When we eat gluten, everyone's cells to some degree will open a little bit. And basically what happens when those cells open up is maybe the beginning or like along the lines of leaky gut. So it just means that undigested particles, toxins, inflammatory byproducts can actually pass into the tissues and the organs beneath, rather than being absorbed into the bloodstream, passing through kidney and liver filtrations. It can cause a really big inflammatory response. So people who have like maybe a tiny bit of gluten intolerance or who don't notice any particular symptoms and would think that they don't have a gluten intolerance, I would argue that because it is such a large protein, it's very, very inflammatory and difficult for us to break down, that you're going to experience some degree. For people who are a lot more gluten intolerant, you'll experience more. And that's when a lot of the symptoms occur, because there's products that then sit in your stomach that go undigested and they can ferment, which causes gas, bloating, a lot of pain. Caffeine is another common food intolerance, as are certain food additives. So some people may have heard of salicylates, sulfites, and amines. You may not have. They're not that commonly spoken about, but they are found in some fruits and vegetables. If you don't suspect any intolerance to them, which honestly, it's not that common. I think if you've gone through a really, really big process of maybe eliminating the main one, so gluten and dairy, and you are still experiencing symptoms, that is when we may start to look at things like food additives, but otherwise it's not very common. And then Fodmaps. So this also has become quite popular. A lot of you probably would have heard people speaking about Fodmaps before. It stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polys. So these are all short-chain carbohydrates, so sugars, and they're basically all very poorly absorbed by our small intestines. I have a little bit of a problem with Fodmaps. I think that it's very poorly understood by a lot of people, and a lot of people don't necessarily use a low Fodmap diet in the best way. So it's also used as a treatment for IBD, and quite successfully for a lot of people. But also with IBD, a lot of people are diagnosed with IBD because a doctor won't know exactly what's going on, and so they label it as IBD. It's basically like, I'm not sure, I don't want to do any more testing. It's really just a misdiagnosis. It's not really an actual physiological thing. We don't know what happens to the body during IBD. I think it's really, it really almost is a misdiagnosis. It's basically there is something going on, but we haven't figured it out yet. So you have IBD and go on a low FODMAP diet, which does have a lot of benefit, to be honest. In someone who has a compromised gut, maybe those cells are really far apart, maybe there's a lot of inflammation in their gut, they do tend to benefit from a low FODMAP diet. But a low FODMAP diet should only be followed for 6 to 8 weeks maximum, because actually after that they found that it is much better for your gut bacteria to be exposed to those FODMAPs, so the fermentable short chain carbons, let's just say the fermentable sugars, because then it strengthens the bacteria. It actually helps to feed a lot of the mucus and the products that are helping to rebuild the gut wall. There may be some others out there who know people who have been on low FODMAP diets for months, years. I know someone who's been on them for years, and I have actually, we've had conversations about it because she's asked me before, and I have mentioned that it's not good to be on them long term. But I think a lot of people, I think they're just maybe scared of change, and also they probably will at first experience some symptoms when they do start eating those not even higher FODMAP foods, those normal foods again. And that is actually normal to get some symptoms again, but your body will adjust. And the body does adjust as, the bacteria alters and it learns how to process those FODMAPs. So the other thing with the FODMAP diet is that it's not like a gluten and dairy where you just don't eat certain products. It is quite intricate in that I think a lot of us will know that onion and garlic are really common ones that people will avoid, but then it gets quite complicated after that. So you can eat a certain amount of a food but no more. But then if you combine it with something else, you can eat a little less. It's very, very confusing. There's actually some really good apps out there to help people navigate it. But I think it does definitely have its place. I think low FODMAP diets, though, are a little bit overused and they're not really relevant to everyone. Salicylate intolerance affects your daughter big time. Yeah, right. That's really interesting. Preservatives affect my 15-year-old immediately. Luckily, we know what her triggers are. Actually, that's really, really good. That's awesome that you know the triggers, because I actually remember having a client before who was really intolerant to preservatives, and their face would just go bright red. They would feel completely off, fatigued, lots of digestive symptoms, and would just be out of it for the rest of the day, basically. And yeah, they had to be really strict about what they did and didn't eat. I guess in a way, maybe I guess it's always good to avoid preservatives in general. Not so fun to have any symptoms, but that's really good that you do know the triggers and you can avoid it. Okay, and then the causes of these different intolerances. So dairy, like I said, you can have a lactase or a casein intolerance. When it comes to the lactase, the lactose, sorry, it's because we don't have enough lactase enzyme to break down those sugars. So basically, yeah, lactase is the enzyme that breaks down the sugar lactose. What happens actually is that as we get older, the lactase enzymes do naturally drop. So some people will notice it when they're young, they can eat as much dairy as they want. And then as they get older, that could be late teens, it could be in their 20s, 30s, 60s, 70s even. They start to notice that they experience some symptoms from eating dairy. And that's because naturally those lactase enzyme levels do reduce over time. Another really interesting thing is that sometimes people are fine to maybe have cereal in their smoothie, milk in their smoothie or in their cereal in the morning. And then when it comes to lunch, if they were to eat yogurt or some other dairy product, that's when they start to experience symptoms. And that's because they may have had enough lactase to break down the dairy in the morning, but then they've literally used it all up and they don't have enough for later in the day. So that's when you're really on your way to a full-blown intolerance. This is one of those intolerances that we can't fix. If you don't have enough lactase enzymes, you just don't have enough, you're best to avoid it. Whereas a lot of other intolerances, it's more a sign, like I said before, that the digestive system, the cells aren't as tight as they should be. There might be inflammation, there might be other damage within the gastrointestinal lining that we can actually work to heal. And then it can help to reduce a lot of whatever the symptoms may be. And you can reintroduce those foods later and continue to enjoy them. Another thing that I actually want to say is that something that I have noticed and definitely have been taught throughout my studies was that if someone experiences a large number of intolerances, because intolerances are a lot more digestive related, it does tend to mean that there is quite a significant disruption in the digestive tract. So if they're intolerant to gluten, dairy, eggs, even random things like cabbage or capsicum. And I think we especially notice this when we do certain testing, which we will get to later. If there comes back with a whole range of different things that they're intolerant to, it normally means that we need to begin at least with some gut healing. I saw a few messages on here. Preservatives. I find food with a lot of additives cause my asthma to get worse. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that is really, really common as well. It's very fascinating to find out how all of these kind of play into each other. I'm intolerant to honey and yogurt, anaphylactic to bees, MSG, penicillin. Oranges cause hive. SBN has been easy to accommodate. Oh, that's great. Interesting. Anaphylactic to bees. Yeah, right. Bees, MSG, and penicillin. Okay, cool. MSG is another really interesting one. Even if people aren't technically intolerant or allergic, it's one that we should all really, really avoid. So basically, it affects glutamine and some other neurotransmitters in our brain, which then makes it really difficult for our bodies to produce GABA. So GABA is a neurotransmitter that's important for anxiety. So if we're treating anxiety, we want to increase GABA, because GABA is kind of like a calming neurotransmitter. It helps to prevent a lot of those overexcited, overreacting kind of stimuli within the brain that cause those anxiety symptoms and feelings. And yeah, MSG is a food additive that has been shown to basically like block that pathway, and instead it turns our neurotransmitters into I can't remember. It was another inflammatory compound, basically, instead of our anti-anxiety neurotransmitter. So it's a really good one for everyone to avoid. Yeah, you might see people write on like Asian or Chinese restaurants, no added MSG. It's not just in those restaurants. There are so many packaged foods that have added MSG, so it's a good one to look out for. Also, it doesn't always say MSG on the label. It'll be under like a flavor enhancer. So check flavor enhancers. I mean, I would say avoid all flavor enhancers, but just look up the numbers and you'll be able to find it. Gluten. So yeah, I did talk about this one before. A few potential underlying causes. It's a really large particle, difficult to absorb, and it also causes that leaky gut. So where the cells of the gut lining start to pull apart. Okay, so how do allergies develop? We've spoken a little bit about intolerances. Let's get back to allergies, because a lot of people think that we are born with our allergies, but technically no one is actually born with an allergy, because it's an immune response. We actually will develop an allergy after the immune system has come into contact with the culprit. So I think this is why a lot of people are concerned or maybe frightened about their kids being exposed to new things for the first time, because if they were to have an allergic reaction, there would be no way of knowing unless you did some allergy testing in advance. There are lots of other potential underlying factors. So like I said, allergies have been on the rise. So there must be something else that comes into play that we have control over or that's influenced this rise. And environmental exposure is definitely an underlying factor. So this is quite an interesting stat. So researchers found that children from different countries within Asia who were raised in Asia experience significantly less allergies than those who were raised in Western countries. So this really strongly suggests that there are other environmental factors other than just genetics that come into play, that's caused these children who are raised in Western societies to experience higher rates of allergies and of allergies. Intolerances. So intolerances, like I said before, are usually exposed by underlying gut challenges. So there will be some sort of digestive response. The gut lining is usually irritated and inflamed. And this can happen for a big number of reasons. One, if we're overexposed to highly inflammatory foods. So like I said, gluten is one of them, but also processed foods, excess sugars, saturated fats, those kind of things are really difficult for our digestive system to process, and then it can cause kind of a compromise to our gut lining. Other things, certainly like alcohol, drugs, whether that's like recreational drugs or pharmaceutical drugs. Then we've got things like MSG, like I said before, excess caffeine, artificial sweeteners, toxins, viruses, bacteria, parasites, potential from contaminated foods, even things like artificial food colors, preservatives, or other flavor enhancers. These are all really, really stressful on our guts and can cause a little bit of that leaky gut, a little bit of gut damage, which then can make us experience symptoms and intolerances to a range of different foods. Okay, so diagnosing allergies and intolerances. So allergies can be diagnosed with skin prick tests or blood tests for allergen-specific IgE. Celiac disease, which is an allergy to gluten. So you can be intolerant to gluten, but you can definitely also be allergic to gluten. It is quite difficult to diagnose this one actually, because it can be done through a blood test, but if anyone has ever gone through the process of trying to figure out whether or not they have celiac disease, you actually have to have been consuming a diet that contains gluten for this blood test to be accurate. So a lot of people, if they know that eating gluten causes a world of pain, they're not going to go through weeks of eating it just to get a diagnosis confirmed. A lot of people will just come to their own conclusion that they're best to not eat it at all. But yeah, skin prick tests is something that you've probably seen children doing. So they basically will put like different foods or however it works on the skin, do their skin pricks with the IgE specific, and be able to tell what the child does and doesn't respond to. Intolerances are quite difficult to diagnose. Like I said, most intolerances can actually be cured to some degree. Well, they can when we heal the gut. So the best diagnostic tool is actually an exclusion or elimination diet. So basically what that involves, you can do it on your own. A lot of people will kind of go through this process while working with a naturopath or a nutritionist or some sort of other therapist. But basically, if you think that you're, say, intolerant to gluten and dairy, you would, let's actually say just gluten. If you think you're intolerant to gluten, you would cut it out for at least 6 to 8 weeks, observe your symptoms over that time. Mostly people will notice that if it was gas, bloating, fatigue, whatever it may have been, that will significantly decrease over those weeks if they're not eating gluten. And then what you do to just test that it was gluten is you spend a day or two eating gluten-containing foods, seeing how the body responds. If those symptoms come back, we basically know that you're intolerant to gluten. And then we'll work from there. Like I said, gluten, though, is one of those ones that you kind of can't actually cure. Same with lactose. You might be able to heal the gut lining, but basically anytime then you eat gluten, you will still have a response. It's more if you're to do, so another way of diagnosing intolerances is through a skin prick or a blood test. So these you can often order online. You can do them through a naturopath or nutritionist. Often you can do them at home too. So I've actually done them on myself and with clients in the past. It's a really easy skin prick test. You then send it off. Actually, no, some of them you can send off. Some of them you can do right there. So you do a skin prick. Can't remember the exact process. You pop it into the little contraption-y thing that you get, and then there's like a list of potential intolerances, and then it all changes color if you're intolerant or not. And then you can see what you're intolerant to. So definitely it does gluten and dairy, but it also does things like eggs, different meats, legumes, lots of different nuts and seeds, lots of different fruits and vegetables too. So this is the one that I more mean when I say that you can heal an intolerance, because if that was to come back and say, okay, you're intolerant to apples, blueberries, lettuce, and spinach, they're not really things that our bodies dislike, that don't suit digestion. That is a really clear sign that there's some sort of compromise going on inside the digestive tract. And that's how we would work to heal the gut, basically, to bring those cells back together, reduce a lot of the inflammation, promote that healthy mucus to kind of increase healing and vulnerable properties. And then often when we retest, depending on exactly what the period of time has been, how compliant the patient has been, those intolerances have almost always gone away, and people can notice that their symptoms have either completely gone or are significantly reducing. A lot of people also often do genetic testing. So genetic testing is quite fascinating. It's not, I would say it's not scientifically proven, but there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of praise for it in general. You can find out some really interesting things. So I think that's worth a go. It's a lot more expensive than doing a skin prick test. A skin prick test, I think you might pay I don't know, $150, $200 for, maybe less, depending on the company. Genetic testing is definitely a lot more expensive. Okay, lactose intolerance is actually diagnosed on like a breath test. So you do this hydrogen breath test, and then it tests how much hydrogen is present in your breath after you've consumed some sort of, I think it's a fructose or something like that, or a lactose. I think you can do it with a fructose intolerance as well. A result showing high levels of hydrogen may indicate that lactose intolerance is present. Fodmap intolerance, it's not, as I said, it's not really something that we diagnose. It's more just a guess and something that people will tend to do if they have IBS. Like I said, a lot of benefits of doing a low FODMAP diet if it suits you. But yeah, it's one that can definitely be misused and kind of misunderstood a lot. Then there are some other potential tests people can do. So you could do like biopsies, a few other different blood tests. Nothing is really technically proven. I would say in general, I think some of the skin prick testing can be quite accurate. Not everybody agrees, but an exclusion diet, if it's done correctly, is probably the most accurate method that we have for testing intolerances. Okay. Great. No new questions have come through. So let's get on to treatments. I think this gets really interesting when it comes to allergies because, like I said at the start, it's quite debated as to whether or not you can ever actually treat an allergy. Once you've got it, you've technically always got it. Your body will always mount an immune response to whatever that allergen will be. The only proven method, not even treatment, of just not experiencing an allergy is avoidance. So if you know that you're allergic to peanuts, don't eat peanuts. If you know you're allergic to bees, don't get stung by a bee. It's quite self-explanatory. But what a lot of practitioners like to instead focus on is that prevention is much better than a cure. So there are some kind of allergen specialists out there that work off these 6 Ds as a guide for preventative measures during childhood. So childhood is definitely the best time to jump onto this because it's when our bacteria, our immune responses are all solidifying and kind of coming about in general, I guess. So these 6 Ds: diet, dirt, dogs, dry skin, detergents, and vitamin D. So studies have found that people have a significantly lower risk of developing an allergen when, as a child, they eat a diverse diet and do so often. So that means that they're eating a large range of different vegetables, so fruits, herbs, legumes, nuts, seeds, whatever it may be. It might be even meat and other kind of plant-based proteins. If they're eating as much diversity as possible, that's been shown to kind of increase their immune response and reduce allergen risks. Eat a diverse diet. Often they have healthy vitamin D levels. So like we said before, vitamin D is really, really important for our immune health. They live with a dog at home. They avoid dry skin. So I don't know exactly why. They found that dry skin kind of increases the risks of developing allergens, potentially because it affects our immune response. Because if skin's dry, maybe more allergens can get through. Not sure exactly, but they've just found a correlation there. Exposure to dirt. So obviously that has to do with building up our gut bacteria and our immune response as well. And then allowing children to develop a good, healthy microbiome. So all of those factors really are important, not just for our immune response, but also for that healthy bacterial balance. So getting a good quantity and quality of bacteria. And our bacteria and immune function are incredibly linked. Most of our immune signals actually come from bacteria. Bacteria literally tell our immune system how to function. So all of these factors that I just listed, all of the 8Ds or however many, or the 6Ds, sorry, are really, really important for developing that really diverse bacteria and immune function as a child, particularly. I think as an adult, a lot of these factors actually can really help with your microbiome. Certainly, I know that eating a diverse diet, even as adults, can really significantly improve our gut bacteria within as little as like 2 to 3 days, they've found. So if you were to start, if you were to had a diet before that was, very highly processed, whatever else it may be, and then you were to begin cutting that out, eating a lot more plant food, you would actually notice the benefits. Oh, you might not actually notice them, but when they did studies, they found that the bacteria was significantly improved. The use of harsh detergents, actually, this is quite interesting. So the chemicals that we're exposed to, whether that is cleaning our skin or cleaning our clothes, has also been associated with an increase in IgE. So IgE is the protein that's produced when people experience an allergy. So if there's way too much IgE, that's actually what causes this anaphylaxis and potential death. So we want to keep the IgE as low as possible. And they found that harsh detergents increase IgE, so therefore it's a really strong recommendation to avoid the use of harsh detergents. There are other treatments that target the immune system. So there is allergen immune therapy, which involves slowly building up exposure to the problem food. I think this is still relatively new. I think a lot of people are quite skeptical and a little bit afraid of doing it with their children because obviously they don't want them to actually experience an allergic response. But a lot of people have had success with it. So I guess it's worth researching or consulting your GP about if it's something that you're interested in if you have someone in your life who experiences an allergy. I think from what I know, and I can't say that I know too much about this, but I think it's most effective if done in childhood. But again, you'd have to speak to your GP. And then there's also anti-Ige drugs. So like I said, IgE, if it's way too high, that's when we experience anaphylaxis. We really want to keep the IgE low. So some people use anti-Ige drugs. There was actually really interesting development recently out of Canberra. So some Canberra researchers at the Australian National University found a protein that would stop allergic reactions and anaphylaxis. So they saw an absence of this protein called Neurotin, and when there is excess Neurotin, people have an increased susceptibility to death from anaphylaxis. So this Neurotin is really highly linked to our IgE levels. This is really early research, but I think just being able to identify that protein is hopefully going to kind of open a few more doors in the area of allergy treatment research. Yeah, I would say if anyone kind of is looking into potential treatments for allergies, try to find someone who specializes in it. I think it's not really common knowledge for too many practitioners, whether that be medical or naturopathic or any other type of holistic practitioner. I think unless they were to specialize in it. So I would definitely say that's your best place to start. All right, so when it comes to intolerances, like I said from the start, most intolerances can be treated, and you don't have to be intolerant to that food forever. Excuse me. The exception would be dairy and gluten. So when it comes to lactose, if you don't have enough lactase, you just simply don't have enough lactase. There's not really much we can do to bring it back. The only thing that I will say, and I don't always like telling people about this because it's not a treatment, it's literally just a Band-Aid. You can go to your local health food store, I think even chemists now, and get these little tablets called Lactase Tablets. And they literally, you ingest lactase. So if you know that you're going out for dinner or somewhere really special and you really don't want to have to avoid dairy or you're simply just not going to, and you don't want to deal with the ridiculous pain that, or whatever the symptoms may be that that you develop afterwards, then that's, I guess, where these lactase tablets would come in handy. I wouldn't be relying on them. I definitely wouldn't be using them day to day or week to week. I would really highly recommend people to not use them often, if at all, but they are an option for anyone who knows that they really, really struggle. Okay, and then general tips to heal food intolerances. So I have touched on this quite a bit, but it's mostly about kind of working with our gut and our digestive response. So first of all, we want to be able to heal the gut lining, so bring those cells back together, reduce a lot of the inflammation, also promote some of that healthy mucus, because the mucus does help to promote a lot of healing. Once we've done that, we also want to be able to stimulate our digestive responses. So once the gut is kind of healed, and I think a way that I often like to describe it is almost like if you consider what someone may look like if they have a rash on their skin, or if they get eczema or psoriasis, it's quite lumpy, red, inflamed, it's a bit cracked. You can kind of see through that top layer of skin. That's almost what we can consider the stomach lining to look like. That really disrupted, disturbed, kind of painful, red, inflamed appearance. So we want to obviously heal that, and then it can work properly again. But then we want to also be able to stimulate some digestive secretions, because if we're digesting things properly, we don't have any of these large particles that are then kind of passing through our gut lining or sitting in our stomachs and fermenting, which is another really big thing that happens during kind of any food intolerance. It's very, very common during food intolerances for our body to be unable to digest these foods, potentially because the stomach lining is so disrupted, but a lot of other factors as well. Then they sit there and they ferment. So we can stimulate our digestion in a number of ways. I think one of my biggest ways, which sounds incredibly simple, is just chewing. So if you were to think about eating, let's say, a piece of broccoli, you maybe chewed it once or twice and then you swallowed it, you've got these massive chunks of broccoli sitting in your stomach that then your stomach acids have to work extra hard to be able to break down into a liquid, really, before you can absorb anything from it, and then before it can be passed through to the next phase of digestion. Whereas if you were to chew that broccoli in your mouth until it was almost a liquid and then you swallowed it, you have taken a massive load off what your stomach now has to do. And the other benefit is that when we chew more, we produce more saliva, which saliva itself helps to break down our food, but then also saliva triggers the secretions in our gut and in our stomach first to then kind of increase. So we've got more stomach acids, and then that will stimulate our pancreas and our liver to produce enzymes and liver bile, which then further break down our food. So chewing is a really big one. You can also do things before your meal like apple cider vinegar, lemon juice in water. I really like our T1 before a meal, so our liver detox tea. It's got a couple of ingredients in there that help to stimulate some of those digestive secretions. If anyone's really interested in increasing the digestive function, one of my favorite products is called Iberogast. You can buy it actually at Chemist Warehouse, also at a lot of health food stores, and that functions to stimulate digestive secretions. It's also got it's all herbal. It's also got a couple of ingredients in there that help to heal the lining of the gut. Okay, so in treating food intolerances, we want to heal the lining of the gut and stimulate digestive secretions. So other ways that we can heal the lining of the gut, one is through food. So definitely sticking to more of those whole food, minimally processed, high fiber, high protein foods that don't have all the added sugars and preservatives and whatever else in them. One, they can promote healing, but also they're not actively aggravating our gut linings. Also, foods that are cooked are a little bit easier to digest. So if you've noticed you've got really bad digestive symptoms and you think you're potentially intolerant to something, or your body's not responding well to something, trying to eat more cooked foods instead. blended foods like smoothies or soups are going to be really good options too, because you don't have any big chunks of anything sitting in your stomach. It's all already liquid. And then a really big diversity of all the plants that you're eating to help feed that healthy gut bacteria. Supplements. So there are a number of supplements you can take to help promote more gut healing. Glutamine is a really big one. So that's actually an amino acid, but what it does is helps bring those cells back together. We use it for gut healing. So it does that function within the gut, helps promote that cell health. People also actually use it for muscle recovery because it does a really similar thing in the muscles. It helps them to heal and grow. Slippery elm is a really lovely one as well, because that kind of puts this coating, this healing coating around your stomach lining. Pectin, aloe vera, marshmallow, Saccharomyces boulardii, they're all either herbal or plant or Saccharomyces. Saccharomyces boulardii actually isn't technically a bacteria, but it promotes healthy bacteria. So all of those ingredients you might see in like gut healing powders, you might find them on their own. They're really, really good to eat after a meal, to take after a meal, maybe 20 to 30 minutes after a meal. You don't want to take it before because especially slippery elm, the way that it works, if it's lining your gut, it doesn't absorb nutrients as well. Okay, so that is all of my recommendations and all of my information on allergies and intolerances. Thanks so much to everyone for joining. If you have any questions, you can feel free to comment them here now and I will answer them here. Otherwise, if you think of any over the evening or the next couple of days or however long it may be, feel free to just comment. This will go up in our Facebook group and I will jump in and answer all of them. All right, have a lovely evening. Thanks, everyone.